I'm going to go through the slide presentation for you. And remember, the goal of lean systems, there's only one goal that we're trying to do. As we're becoming more and more lean, we're trying to eliminate waste, trying to get rid of waste, no matter what waste is. Waste could be stuff that we don't need. Waste could be people that we don't need. Waste could be, here we go. Waste could be time. We want to get rid of wasted time, and time is money. So what we need to do to get rid of waste is the goal here in lean systems. We talked about PDCA, we talked about Six Sigma. We mentioned last time just in time, which is getting products just when you need them at the last possible moment. That's just in time. That way eliminates having to look for something, and it eliminates having to wait needlessly for time. And that idea of having that waste. Things are delivered just in time. It's helpful for us. Toyota was a company, so TPS, Toyota Production Systems, was the original title for being lean. While you're lean, if time is money, you have dedicated times for preventative maintenance. We talked about brushing your teeth and getting your oil changed and things like that. We talked about focus factories, which are factories that used to focus specifically on making one product or one product line, and that was it, because everybody got to know what was being done. People were all experts because they were so used to making that one product. We talked about a pull system versus a push system. In a pull system, much like just in time, product is given to the customer or given to the next part of the process when they need it, not pushed to them after the previous part is done. Previous part of the process is done. So we talked about humanitarianism and how other countries that think that there's a disaster, they'll push all of their needless or their supplies to that country, even though this country might not need those supplies. Pull system is when there's an actual demand. The country that's unaffected by a natural disaster is asking for a specific list of things, and then they get brought to that. The country that's providing those products provide the right things. So a pull system is that just in time. A push system is just throwing everything at the end of a process to the next step of the process or to the customer. In Kanban in lean systems, we always do pull systems because we want to eliminate any potential waste. We only want to deliver things that are needed exactly when they're needed. Kanban was this card process system. I don't know if you guys caught that well enough. It's a way to, it really comes down to visual controls. Remember that? Yes, no, red, green. So a visual control lets a warehouse know when a step of the process needs raw materials. And so when a card goes up, a yellow card, I'm running out of inventory for this product. A red card, I am out of inventory for this product. Therefore, I need new. The warehouse sees that. They then provide the appropriate product to that station. And it's kind of like a simple visual control, but it allows for a lot more streamlined processes, a reduction in flow time and cycle time for that product, and it allows for more efficiency so that can be passed on to the customer. So it makes life a lot easier. We talked about quality at the source, eliminating defects, Kaizen events, process analysis, and value stream mapping. 5S, which we talked about very briefly, it's sort, straighten, scrub, systematize, and standardize. This is when you have a shared workspace for other people and for yourself. It would be we outline everything. Everything has a home. Everything has a place. And to that end, I want to show you this video, and hopefully it still works. So let me stop the recording for a moment. Oh, no, this is fine. It's okay. Let me share it. Oh. Uh-oh. Okay, so I'm going to show you an example of what a lean system looks like. This idea of a 5S. Oh. Well, hold on. All right, come on. I want to share this video. Okay. And hopefully you can see it. The music is not important. I don't know if you can hear the music or not. But where'd it go? All right, let's try this again. Excuse me. Come on. Here we go. Okay. Hopefully you can see this. Long story short, you can see a really messy supply room in the ICU at a random hospital. And that's what they're going to show you is how do you go to the 5S's: sort, set in order, shine, or scrub, standardize, and sustain instead of systematize. So it's a 5-step process of going through, and right now they're sorting everything out. So as they're sorting what needs to stay in the hospital room, the ICU supply room, and what doesn't. So whatever doesn't have to can be taken out of the room. It makes things eliminate. It eliminates them. It makes for more room. It makes for easier to find things that are never used, things are replaced by a different item, things that are expired. And that's the process. And then once you've done that, once you've eliminated the things that don't need to be in the room, the next step is to set an order. And here you can see it's kind of a group effort. Everybody is trying to go through and see what's there, what needs to be there, what doesn't need to be there, get rid of things that are expired, get rid of things that don't belong, things that need to be returned somewhere else, overstock, we just stick it into our room. What do we need? So yeah, thousands of dollars worth of expired products, right? So when things just kind of hang out in a room for a while, not only does it make it harder to find things, but there are items in there you can't even use. So set in order, a place for everything and everything in its place. Or in other words, everything has a home. So for the things that are staying in the room, make sure you have a home for everything that's there. And it's labeled and identified, easily identified. And like I said, everything is labeled, everything has a home, everything has a place. And so if you are a person that has a messy bedroom or has a messy workspace, this may work for you. Now, keeping the area spotless, which means shine, it's cleaning or scrub. We're going to make it to the point where it's so clean that people can look at it and they know exactly where things are. Everything has a place. And standardize is make sure everything is being done the same way. Notice how everything is labeled. I mentioned last time that in an office, and usually in a manufacturing environment, you even put masking tape down around certain things where things always belong. So if you can imagine being in your kitchen, where's your soap dispenser? Where's your dish soap? Imagine putting masking tape around that so that you have that. Now, why would you do that? Because if something is missing, you know exactly that it's not there. You know that it should be there. So it's a little bit easier to identify something is missing, like your dish soap. And so that's this standardized thing. And then sustain is just making sure you do it every day. Everything gets put back to where it's supposed to go. Everything is easy to find. Everything is organized. Everything is clean. And what this does is it eliminates waste as far as time. It eliminates waste as far as expired products that don't belong in this closet. All these things are regularly there. Sorry, all these things are not. It helps with lean, and in this sustain or this last standardized systematized process, you're always auditing, always making sure that you're still clean, that things aren't going back to the way they were. So, and then having these different meetings, identifying what's working, what's not working, and you can see the difference. So you can see before and after. Everything looks organized. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. And again, if you are working in a shared space like this, it makes a lot more sense to do that. So this is what 5S is. Like I said, it's almost like anal retentiveness cleaning to the extreme, but it's very helpful. And it's this idea that if we get rid of this in lean, we end up saving ourselves a lot of time, a lot of chasing things around, a lot of trying to figure out where things are, and not using things or potentially being, in this case, hazardous, using items that may have already been expired and potentially could harm other people. And there's this idea of being ultra lean in 5S. So, okay, back to the slides. So we want to be highly lean, and across the supply chain, we purchase for the lowest total cost, not the lowest price. Remember, total cost of ownership was the cost before, during, and after we buy a product. Geographically close partners. Why is that? Because if we have really close partners geographically, we can get product just in time. It's pretty quick. It's pretty immediate. Having fewer suppliers is good because that way we only trust the few suppliers that we have. We don't have to worry about thousands of suppliers. Remember, we talked about supply-based optimization at one point. Focus on the root cause of a problem instead of the symptoms, because that way if we can get rid of the root cause, we can identify the problem and get rid of it in the future, not have that problem anymore. And work with, not against suppliers. Now, from an innovation perspective, lean is meeting exactly as the customer needs. It's supporting a corporate strategy exactly as we want it and reducing waste everywhere, wherever we find it. So wherever we may find waste, time waste, motion waste, labor waste, etc. Right? And here are the 7 wastes. Now there are actually 8, so I'm going to flip to the next slide. But if you can look at these 7 wastes, Shigeo Shingo in Toyota had identified 7 types of waste, and we still use these today. So the waste of overproduction, that means producing more than I need to make. So if I need to make 300 items, I make 300. I don't make 350 just in case. I make 300. Why? Because that's the fewer raw materials that I need, the fewer finished goods I have, the less amount of space I have to take up in my warehouse if I produce something. So waste of overproduction, the waste of waiting, again, trying to wait, having to wait for somebody. Imagine using a Kanban system, putting up your yellow card, putting up your red card, and eventually running out of inventory, and the warehouse doesn't notice. So just waiting and doing nothing for 10, 15 minutes, that's a huge amount of time that you could be doing something, but you're not. Similarly, the waste of transportation, transporting goods from one warehouse to another. Why not just have it all in one warehouse so you can access those goods a lot easier? So the waste of transportation, or transporting goods from, say, the 2nd floor to the 4th floor, right? It would be a lot easier if they were both next to each other, if there's a sequential in a process. The waste of processing, over processing. And the difference here is processing is making more than you need, not necessarily making more products. That's overproduction. Waste of processing is making something, doing a lot more processing, doing a lot more for creating a product than you really need to. An example of this would be having way too many features than a customer needs. So if it needs to be an alarm clock that has 2 settings, it doesn't need to have 5 settings, right? Even though the design would be very cool if you had 5 settings, you only need 2. And so this over processing, or maybe if, we're okay doing lot testing. Remember, we talked about in the cost of quality, the internal failure cost and doing testing of products. It's okay if we have 1,000 products and we test 5 of them. But if we want to test 100%, we could. But that's over processing. You're actually killing something. You're going overkill. Waste of inventory, the waste of having extra inventory that's needed, then what you really have to have, that's a relationship to a waste of overproduction. So having a waste of extra inventory, or even raw material inventory that you're not going to need. So go back to the 5S example we just did. The waste of motion, people moving around aimlessly, having to go from upstairs down to downstairs to get a signature and waiting on email and everything. Just the waste of motion, people physically moving more than they should have to get raw materials or to put finished goods away, etc. And then finally, the last one is called rework. Rework is when you have defective products and you need to fix them. Well, it would have been a lot easier and a lot simpler and a lot less time consuming if you had just made it right the first time. So the waste of making defective products, we don't want to have defective products. Remember, we went back to the X bar R chart with the 1, 2, and 3 sigma, and we have to stop the process if it's out of process, if the next observation is far away from the average or far away from our standard deviations. Now, here's a pictorial version of it. And I always thought this was helpful because it shows the 7 forms of waste. And then there's an 8th waste too. So the first one is overproduction. We talked about that, making more than we need to. Inventory is having more raw material or finished goods than we need to have. So it's a result of overproduction. Waiting is people just waiting and hanging out. So waiting for a work cycle to be completed. Motion, people moving unnecessarily or moving parts or moving machines within a process. Transportation, moving product or people from different processes. And the difference between motion and transportation is usually between facilities. So not just within the facility. Waste of motion is within the facility. Waste of transportation is between facilities. So if our warehouse is in a different building on our lot than our production facility, that's moving product back and forth as transportation waste. Rework, number 6, that's the idea of making defective products that we have to fix. 7, overprocessing, going beyond what's required of the customer. Japanese word for waste is called muda, M-U-D-A. So when you talk about muda, that's this idea of having waste. And then the last one, the upper right, and notice it's small because it's something we don't often talk about, is the waste of people. And what does that mean? That means I have too many people for a design process. I have too many people. And really, why that's a waste is because there are a lot of talented people that have specific skills and talents. So why don't you identify what those talents are instead of putting them in a position where they're doing something menial, like putting together boxes or putting parts in packages to be delivered or printing labels. I mean, there are people that have skills like HR and accounting and finance and sales and marketing. Like, put them where they need to go. You don't want to have wasted people. If you have, to go back to leadership and Jim Collins' Good to Great, having the right people on the right seats on the bus. So if you can imagine your organization like being a bus, having the right people in the right seats makes things go a lot faster and a lot easier. They're much more qualified than having too many people do simple menial tasks. So that's this idea of the eighth waste, muda, is the waste of people. Now, there are videos for this too, and there are other people will talk about other aspects of waste, but I really want you to know these 7. And then an eighth one potentially being a waste of people. So we talked about lean really quickly. If we're lean, we're good, right? So lean, we're actually being we're being a really good steward of our time. We're being a really good person involved in getting rid of our waste, being really good at reducing our costs and helping on our supply chain. So what's the problem? Well, if you remember back in marketing, we have external forces that act on us. And we don't know what those external forces are. We've got a political election coming up in a couple of weeks. Was it next week? Next week. We've got social change, natural disasters and hazards that happen in the world, the economy changing, competition. What is our competition doing? Legal and political changes, operational or technological changes, either for us or our customers. All of these things can cause supply chain disruptions. And here's the problem. If you're too lean, you can't be flexible. You see, the goal of lean is getting rid of waste so we can be really efficient. But if one of these things changes, we need to adapt to that. For example, a natural disaster or a hazard we have is the pandemic. So how do we function in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, we need to be a little bit flexible. We need to be able to move around. But remember, the removal of waste is the goal of lean. When we talk about being flexible, you need something called slack. So that slack is having extra stuff. That slack is, if somebody gets called out because they have coronavirus, I can replace somebody else in that position. I can put them there so they can still work and we can still get things done. But remember, having duality or having excess is waste. So that's the problem. And a great example I like to tell classes with this is there was a company called American Shower and Bath, and they created these bathroom tub installs for new homes. So if you can imagine, you have a bathroom tub, and in that, to lay that tub in and caulk it in the right spot in the bathroom, they created it's called a folding panel, a folding tile panel, which is these giant sheets of ceramic-like material that they would unfold. The installer could unfold it, take off the plastic on the back, and it had an adhesive on it. You could literally just glue it to the walls. And so you have this panel of tile that goes around the bathroom area and the tub area, and it just sets in there. You don't have to glue it yourself. You just take off the plastic, stick it in, and it's done. In the bottom, you put in, you connect your bathtub. So this idea from American Shower and Bath was great. They sold it to Home Depot. Home Depot said, "We'll try it for, excuse me, in 4 different locations for a couple months and see how successful it is." So they tried it. It sold pretty well, but didn't sell great. And so when American Shower and Bath called back Home Depot saying, "Hey, do you want more of these?" They said, "No, we're actually good. We're comfortable having the products we have. We don't need any more." So they contacted Lowe's and said, "Lowe's, would you be interested in having more of these tile walls that we installed and that we have for our products?" And they said, "Well, we'll get back to you. We're going to try it out in a few test locations ourselves." And in the process, American Shower and Bath got really lean. They tried to reduce costs. They tried to reduce waste. They made it a cheaper price because they thought it might be more attractive to Home Depot and Lowe's. Lowe's calls back and says, "We love your product. We would like to have 50,000 of them for our store chains." And American Shower Bath said, "Well, we can make about 100 a month." Now, here's a problem, because they've been so lean, so efficient, Now there's a customer that wants 50,000 of these products and they can't make them. As a matter of fact, the lead time, the amount of time from an order to the amount of time when you get it delivered, was 58 weeks. Now think about that. That's more than a year. Can you imagine telling a big chain like Lowe's, okay, we'll get you your products, your demand within a little bit more than a year? I mean, that's crazy. But here's an example of being too lean, where when a home run came up, because Lowe's wanted a huge amount of these tile walls, they couldn't react and therefore actually lost the business to another company that made a similar fabricated product. So here's an example of being too lean. You just can't, once you've taken all the waste out of everything, you're not flexible anymore. And we'll talk about that as we talk about Agile today, that you need to have that flexibility. Okay, we talked about Six Sigma. Oh, and these slides we talked about before. Again, Six Sigma, the idea that we're trying to reduce waste, trying to have 4 defects per million and trying to make it more efficient, etc. Okay. Okay, and I just talked about the home runs. So we're okay there. All right, now let me get into a different slide set. When we talk about lean, we talked about reducing waste and eliminating as much waste as possible. Now I want to talk about being the exact opposite. And when you're the exact opposite, you're called what's called agile. This comes from a software design perspective. You'll hear something, you may see something or may see ads for something. I saw one on Facebook yesterday, something called the Agile Manifesto. Agile is really being customer effective. It's giving the customer what they want. It's taking a long design process for, say, a video game, breaking it down into small chunks. And as you're making the video game or making the software, you stop and you ask the customer, is this what you want? Is this what you want? And that way, if they say yes, you're on the right track. You're doing the right thing. Continue working on the software. If the answer is no, then you've got to figure out what the customer wants and need to kind of change your direction so that you can make the software that they need. And so the opposite of lean is agile. Remember, lean is the elimination of waste, just in time, pull system versus push system, the idea of Kaizen, reducing cost, PDCA and Six Sigma, standardizing our process, 5S, mapping our process, finding out where the bottlenecks are, statistical process control or XBAR R charts, histograms, Pareto charts, etc. That's lean. And it said that there are potential problems if there's a need to be flexible because of a disaster or because of a social change or a legal change. It's hard to do when you're really lean. So on one side, you've got efficient firms, and these are the lean firms. They've taken all of the waste out. And on the other side, you've got effective firms. These are firms that meet the customer demand exactly and give the customer exactly what they want. These provide happy customers. The problem is when you're lean, you might not be effective. And when you're effective, when you're agile, you might not be efficient. And so you're not reducing your cost. So can you be both? So give the customer what they want and be cost effective. Again, lean and agile is here. So is lean good? We can reduce our costs, but how do we weather the storms if we have problems? How do we adapt to changes? Well, again, if you're effective, you're agile. Agile means being sensitive to customer demand. You're being more willing to customize products. You have more slack in your supply chain. Here's an example of slack. Home Depot is really big on providing clean clothes to people who have been affected by hurricanes. Now, what they do is they have a fleet of trucks. Home Depot has a fleet of trucks. They've worked with P&G, Procter & Gamble, with Tide. And what they do is they provide these trucks, these trailers, to people affected, say, Louisiana, or they provide product to people in Atlanta or people in Florida. These trucks will drive down to an affected area after a disaster. They'll open up the trucks, and inside the trucks and it has a generator and washing machines. So in case you've just experienced a disaster, you have no power, and you may not have food or water for a while, American Red Cross will take care of the food. The Baptist Church will take care of the food for those people. But then how do they do their laundry? Because you still need to have clothes. So Home Depot has a fleet of trucks. I think there's 24. They'll send to a region where people can do their laundry. It has a washer and dryer capabilities in the back of this trailer. And so Home Depot holds on to these. Well, in a non-hurricane season, let's say February, what happens to these trucks? Well, they just sit in a warehouse outside of Tennessee, I think, waiting for a natural disaster to happen. So that's money, that's cost, that's sitting there, that's not being used, it's not helping people, and there's no revenue from it at all anyway. It's just goodwill, right? All of that is agile. That is waste according to lean. I mean, these trucks just sitting in Tennessee not doing anything. Even when there's a hurricane season, if the trucks aren't being used, there's no point. So that's just waste. We should get rid of it. But agile allows for being agile or having the slack lets us have these trucks just hanging out in a warehouse for the what if, for the what happens if, for the when this is needed. And so this is the idea of agile. Again, agile and lean are kind of opposite enemies, because lean would say, well, that's waste, we need to get rid of it. Agile says that's slack. In case we need to be flexible, we can do that. We can use these. And again, agile is being focused on the customer and less on cost reduction. So again, we're going to talk about being agile. So being agile is really focused on meeting the needs of the customer, not focused on reducing cost. So here's how do you be agile? Meet demand as it is. If 5,000 snow shovels are needed, you make 5,000 snow shovels, right? You don't try to cut out costs on them. You don't try to make as good quality with lesser materials or fewer products. We're going to try to build in slack into our process, which is waste. Now, this is interesting because from a lean perspective, that means as a lean person, you have to think, all right, that's waste, but we need to keep that. And if you've learned from Business 101, always be more effective than more efficient. Because if you're more effective, you're always going to have customers. If you're more efficient, you may lose customers because they're not getting the products that they need. And so being agile is responding to real demand. It's information-based rather than inventory-based. When do we need products? Where do we need to have products? Where do we need to have services? It's collaboration between working buyers and suppliers. It's collaboration between customers and suppliers and the stakeholders that you have. That's being agile. Now, the question is, wouldn't it be great to be both? Wouldn't it be great to be effective and efficient simultaneously? That would be intense. That'd be great. We can make that happen. And there's actually a word for this. It's called lean agility. It's being lean and doing more with less and giving the customer exactly what they want. So being lean agile. Okay, so how do you do this? Well, on the one side, we're very customer oriented with agile. On the other side, we're trying to be very company friendly by reducing cost, which means we need to meet in the middle somewhere. So if you can see this oval that's circled as C, that's kind of where we need to be, a mixture of lean and agile. And through research, there are 3 ways to do this. The first is the relationship with the suppliers, something called the decoupling point, which is capacity, not inventory. So we don't build until we actually have to build, until the last moment where we build something. Second is level versus chase production. And third is postponement. So what are these? Well, decoupling points are, I'm going to be lean down my entire supply chain. Remember, a supply chain was a line of different companies, tiers and echelons that we've talked about downstream. We're going to continue to go downstream and be lean until we meet the final customer, usually the retail center. This is what Apple does. So Apple has a really lean supply chain until you get to the Apple store. And then you as the customer, when you go into the Apple store, hopefully have a great experience. You can try out different products. You can get your current products already fixed. You can have iOS updates installed there at the Apple store. The Apple store experience is really great. Another company that does this is American Girl. American Girl will have a plethora of different accessories and different dolls that you can buy and storybooks, and it's an entire environment for people who like American Girl dolls, but they're really lean in manufacturing the products and the accessories and the boxes, etc., up until that point to when you go to the American Girl store. So on the lean side, you're focusing on batch quantities, you're maximizing your efficiencies, you're reducing your cost, you forecast, which we'll talk about in exam 3, at a generic level, 3,000, 5,000, 6,000. You don't really have a specific demand. Then when you get to the final retail store, it's demand driven. There's product there, but you can also order product online at that store, at that Apple store or that American Girl store. You maximize effectiveness when you get to that final retailer. And that triangle in the middle is the decoupling point. That's where you switch from lean to agile and really make the customer experience wonderful. All right, that's the first one. The second one is a level versus chase strategy. Now, what is that? A chase strategy is chasing demand. So you can see the sinusoidal curve on the left side. When demand is 4,000, 4,500, I make 4,500. When demand is 2,000, I make 2,000. When demand is 5,000, I make 5,000. When demand is 3,000, I make 3,000. Whatever demand is for that month, I'm going to make it. So think of, well, this week is Halloween. So think Halloween candy, bags of Hershey's miniatures. I need to make 4,500 pallets of Hershey's miniatures for the Midwest. And then I need to make 5,000 bags of Hershey's miniatures for the Midwest the following week. And then the following week, I need to make 3,000. And then the following week, I need to make 6,000. Chasing demand is making exactly that's needed. That's agile. Another way to do this is take all the forecasts for the next, say, 6 weeks and add them up and divide by 6, the number of weeks we have. And then you have an average. So on average, I've got, let's say, 3,000 products I need to make every week. And that'll meet some of the 4,500, and that'll meet some of the 2,000 that I've got. So if I make 3,000 bags per week, the nice thing here is I don't have to keep changing people. So if I have temporary work helping to make these candies, then I've got to have more people when I make more, and I have to let some people go when I have to make less because I'm trying to be efficient, right? Now, if I average the amount that I have, a level strategy, then I don't have to keep hiring and firing people. I just make 3,000 every week. So I always have 3,000. Now, the downside of level is that sometimes, some weeks I'll have the demand at 3,000, but some weeks the demand is 4,500 and I don't have it. Some weeks, though, the demand is 2,000 and I do have that. So what I can do is if the demand is 2,000 and I have 3,000 that I've made, then I have 1,000 left over. So in the next week, if I make 3,000 and my demand is 4,500, I can use the extra inventory I had from last week. And I can still try to make it. It's not perfect, but it's a way to kind of bring in those cost reductions at the same time while meeting customer demand and being effective. So here's this concept of level versus chase strategy. And then there's another one I'm going to talk about later in the semester called a hybrid strategy. And that is combining these two, level versus chase. But realize that one way to maximize on the agility is to have chase demand take the average of, say, 6 to 8 weeks out forecasts and then average them and then make that many. And that way you don't keep hiring and firing people because that's costly, right? And there's a lot of uncertainty too. If you hire a temporary worker and then you fire them the next week and then you hire them back, are they going to want to come back? Right? Because I got fired at one point. I'm not sure I want to have that relationship with this company. So level versus chase strategy is another way to do it. And then finally, postponement. Postponement is making most of the product up front and then not making it anymore, waiting till you have a final order. So let's say we're making printers. A printer works really well. Printers can be used anywhere in the country. Let's say it's a 3D printer, or let's say it's an inkjet printer. We can use it anywhere we need to. The only difference is if we sell it to, say, France, it's in Troyes, France, instead of in the United States. The only difference is the power, the outlet. You need to have a 220 watt instead of a 110 watt or 120 watt we have in the United States. So you have to have a different plug adapter. And you have to have an instruction manual in French, not in English. And so postponement would say, make your product all the way through so you finish the product, but then don't box it until you know that it's going to France. So when you box it up, you put in the language instruction manual, you put in the plug adapter, and then you can send it to France. So postponement is doing as much as you can and then stopping at some point and just waiting. Here's another example. This is a true story. Disney World, 7 years ago, made alarm clocks, and they had the exact and same internal housing for the alarm clock. All the parts are the same. They were sold for the US market. And they had two types. They had Disney Princess, which were traditionally pink, and had Disney Princess characters on the outside and the housing. And then they also had Toy Story. And so Toy Story was bluish color and had Buzz Lightyear and had Woody on the outside of it. And what Disney did is they made these alarm clocks with the same electrical conduits. They had the same power. They had the same tools, same stuff on the inside. But then when they finally got an order at Disney World, whether they needed Toy Story or they needed Disney Princesses, they changed the housing. So postponement, they made the clock all the way through, but didn't put the final housing on until they had an order. When they got the order, they said, okay, I need 2,000 Disney Princess clocks. They put the correct housing on the outside. They package them up and send them to Walt Disney World. So there's an example of postponement. doing as much as you can up to a point and then stopping. Okay, that's what I've got for my lean agile systems. Okay, that's a lot of material, and we are out of time. So what do you think? How are we doing? Does this make sense? This is the end of exam 2. So I will put together an exam study guide for you guys for Friday, and we'll go over that. I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'm